Azerbaijão ainda é um país pouco conhecido aqui na América do Sul e no Brasil. Mas, como eu falei para vocês na semana passada, que eu me encantei por este país na minha segunda viagem e traria para vocês uma série de programas. Na semana passada mostramos vários pontos turísticos de Baku, mas nada pode ser feito sem falarmos da história. Então hoje, neste programa, nós vamos falar da história do Azerbaijão, da independência do Azerbaijão, nós vamos falar de Heydar Aliyev, que foi um dos presidentes do Azerbaijão que trouxe muita prosperidade para o país, usando os recursos do petróleo, do óleo e fazendo que o Azerbaijão fosse um país potência que é hoje. Então nós vamos falar aí sobre a história, sobre a arquitetura, sobre monumentos do Azerbaijão ao redor do mundo. Vamos falar um pouquinho também mais, contar mais um pouco da história dos tapetes e eu conto com vocês aí para ficarem de olho neste programa que está maravilhoso. Muito obrigada.
A palavra Azerbaijão significa guardião do fogo. Pode ser pela sua privilegiada localização, que fica na Eurásia, na fronteira entre a Europa e a Ásia. A República Democrática do Azerbaijão proclamou sua independência em 1918 e tornou-se a primeira república democrática cuja população é composta majoritariamente por muçulmanos e ao mesmo tempo secular, agregando assim pessoas e monumentos de várias religiões. Além disso, foi a primeira nação de maioria muçulmana após o Egito a contar com óperas, teatros e universidades modernas. O país foi incorporado à União Soviética em 1920 como a República Socialista Soviética do Azerbaijão e proclamou sua independência em outubro de 1991, antes da dissolução da União. A nação é uma república constitucional, presidencial e unitária, governada sob um sistema de partido dominante e é um Estado membro do Conselho da Europa, da OSCE e do Programa Parceria para a Paz da OTAN. É um dos 6 estados independentes falantes da língua turca, sendo um membro ativo no Conselho Turco e na Organização Internacional da Cultura Turca. O Centro Cultural Heydar Aliyev é um complexo construído na Avenida Heydar Aliyev, na cidade de Baku, capital do Azerbaijão. Inclui um centro de congressos, museu, biblioteca e parque. Este complexo foi projetado em 2007 pela arquiteta iraquiana Zaha Hadid e nomeado após Heydar Aliyev, líder da era soviética de 1969 a 1982 e presidente do Azerbaijão de outubro de 1993 até outubro de 2003. O Centro Cultural Heydar Aliyev se tornou o símbolo da Baku moderna. Ele representa a ascensão e o desenvolvimento do país. Seu logotipo prateado se relaciona com a ideia de desenvolvimento, progresso e futuro do Azerbaijão. Este projeto arquitetônico foi inclusive transmitido pelo canal Discovery Channel e Ciência, que é dedicado aos projetos de engenharia mais ambiciosos do mundo. Durante o episódio, o apresentador Danny Foster se referiu ao centro Heydar Aliyev da seguinte forma: não é apenas um centro cultural, é uma forma de afirmar o seu lugar no mundo. Neste contexto, ele se refere ao Azerbaijão como um país que inicia uma nova era, a era da modernidade e do progresso. Foi assim que pudemos ver que, após o programa e esta apresentação em 2011, o Azerbaijão realmente tomou rumos diferentes e se tornou um país progressista e secular, onde pessoas de várias religiões se encontram, como muçulmanos, judeus, cristãos, e assim podemos também ver que vários monumentos são dedicados a pessoas de outros credos. No Azerbaijão podemos encontrar igrejas, sinagogas, todos muito bem cuidados pelo governo. Como vocês podem ver nas imagens que passo agora, há estátuas do grande líder Heydar Aliyev erguidas em várias capitais mundiais, em Kiev, na Ucrânia, Istambul, na Turquia, Tashkent, no Uzbequistão, Bucareste, na Romênia e também na Rússia, na Geórgia e na Cidade do México.
Eu convido você agora para assistir a minha entrevista com o jornalista britânico, meu colega Neil Watson. Neil, thank you for being here with me today at the programa Mundo Diplomático. It's a real pleasure to talk to a British friend like you and a person who knows a lot about Azerbaijani culture also. I would like to hear from you about the Azerbaijani history, architecture, and about the Azerbaijani monuments around the world. Please.
Hello there, thank you for asking me to record my comments about Azerbaijani architecture and its legacy. Well, it should be borne in mind that the region that's now known as Azerbaijan is actually one of the earliest areas of the world where the horse was domesticated and where Zoroastrianism, which is one of the earliest religions, originated. And this can be seen very clearly in some of the petroglyphs in Gobustan, which is a UNESCO protected site just outside of Baku, where we have one of the largest collections of petroglyphs, that is rock paintings, anywhere in the world. And some of these date back 5 millennia. And every year scientists from around the world come to Azerbaijan specifically to study these petroglyphs, and this has led to some very interesting theories. Obviously they're looking at the development of humanity at that time, but also trying to see the connections between civilizations. And Thor Heyerdahl, the famous Norwegian explorer in the 1950s, believed that some of the boats that could be seen in some of the petroglyphs were similar to those actually found in petroglyphs in Norway, and he tried to work out connections between Azerbaijan and Norway. Obviously none of this can be completely proven, but this proves to be a source of fascination for lots of scientists coming to Azerbaijan. When we go to Baku itself, we can actually see the walled city. That is the old city, História, which is a UNESCO protected site, as indeed is Gobustan. And this it was built between the 12th and the 14th centuries, and it's intact. It's completely intact. We've got single-story buildings most of the time, all of them built out of the local Agalai limestone, all of them beautifully preserved by the Azerbaijani government and reconstructed, particularly in the 19th century. And then also in there we have the Maiden Tower, which is a structure which is emblematic of Baku and indeed of Azerbaijan itself. It's found on Azerbaijani banknotes, it's been included in Azerbaijani operas, at the very first cinema film to be produced in Azerbaijan, the full-length feature film was called The Maiden Tower. It's something that's very, very emblematic of Azerbaijan. It's, as I say, there's lots of legends associated with it, but the fact is that it's been maintained and restored very sympathetically over the years. And if one ascends it now, first of all, you get a very fantastic view of Baku itself, but then also you can actually learn something about the history of Azerbaijan as one goes up the mezzanine floors. So you learn all about Azerbaijani carpets, tapestries, pottery, metalwork, and of course the history of oil, which is something that's been very important to Azerbaijan for a very, very long time. And indeed it's the importance of this oil which led to the next development in Azerbaijani architecture, which was during the first oil boom of the late 19th, early 20th century. Indeed, Azerbaijan was the first place where oil was mechanically extracted, where the Nobel brothers and the Rothschilds were active, and they actually launched the first oil tanker, known as the Zoroaster, out of Baku in the 1880s, if memory serves me correctly. And this led to a lot of oil millionaires, predominantly homegrown Azerbaijanis, deciding to build very palatial residences in the centre of the city. So we've got lots of very beautiful palaces and villas, which synthesise Art Nouveau, but with also some Azerbaijani overtones. So first of all, they are built very much out the Agalai limestone, and they will not have all the trappings that we would find in Art Nouveau. For example, at the time, representations of human beings was not allowed because of Islamic law, but they actually use a lot of the trappings that we find in European architecture, and that is because they were using some of the very, very best architects in Poland, Russia, Sweden to actually produce these very unique palaces. And this also resulted in the intelligentsia constructing the first opera house in the east. The first Muslim girls' school was launched in Azerbaijan by the wonderful entrepreneur Haji Tagiev in the late 19th century. So it was very much a time of the Azerbaijani Enlightenment taking place, and this was represented in the buildings. And indeed later on we actually see this continue during the Soviet era with the constructivist buildings that were built in the late 1920s, early 1930s. Again, Azerbaijan was still a very wealthy place due to its oil deposits. It was supplying nearly 70% of the oil for the former Soviet Union, and it was one of the largest oil producing places in the world, in fact. So we see some very interesting constructivist architecture being used at that time, obviously particularly for public buildings, but also for residential buildings, because there was a lot of industry in Baku at the time. It was a kind of oil boom continuing, albeit in a different way with a different ethos attached to it. So we're seeing some very interesting libraries, institutions, educational institutions and so forth being built at this time. And then if we come up to the modern day, we have some outstanding examples of contemporary architecture being launched. Obviously there is the flame towers which flicker above the streets of Baku. That is three flame-shaped tower blocks which are used for have various uses, but they have LEDs in them where obviously they can show flames, but also the Azerbaijani flag, and also relate to visiting dignitaries, events taking place in the city and so forth. There's the Crystal Hall, which was built on an artificial lake for the 2012 Eurovision Song Contest. We have obviously the Zaha Hadid's Heydar Aliyev Centre, which was built 9 years ago, and it was the only place in the world where Zaha Hadid was actually able to demonstrate the uses of her curved structures, and she used the latest in glass fibre reinforced concrete to produce this, and also bore in mind very much the environmental impact of what she was doing by producing a building that actually used the thermal mass of the structure to avoid the need for air conditioning and also for heating. It just maintains a relatively constant temperature throughout the year. It uses lots and lots of natural materials, most notably wood. So there's some wonderful new structures appearing in Baku, plus lots of apartment blocks, again built out of the Agalai limestone, and very much reiterating what we see in the buildings from the first oil boom. So all the time we've seen that, yes, there are various styles in Azerbaijani architecture, but always the national style and the national materials and the use of very elaborate stonemasonry has been maintained. Certainly there is a very specific Bakuvian style, an Azerbaijani style, that we can see in all the buildings in Baku. But also the government is very interested in maintaining these because it realised that they are synonymous with the soul of Azerbaijan, with the soul of the city. And this interest in maintenance is something that extends far further than the borders of Azerbaijan itself. We've seen over the last 10 years numerous Heydar Aliyev parks have actually been opened, predominantly in former Soviet republics, but also in Mexico as well, where green areas have been restored, the buildings within them have been restored, and also Heydar Aliyev's statue has been erected. So I believe that Azerbaijan's stance towards its history and its architecture should be applauded and acknowledged across the world. Thank you very much indeed for letting me make these comments.
Muito obrigada pela sua audiência aqui comigo mais uma vez. E eu aguardo vocês nos próximos programas, porque nós vamos falar também sobre gastronomia, nós vamos falar sobre a cidade de Xuxa, a cidade histórica de Xuxa no Azerbaijão, sobre cultura, língua e muito mais. Então eu conto com vocês aí no próximo programa. Muito obrigada.